guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Sydney. I'm a perinatal athletic therapist and postnatal fitness specialist. Today I want to take you through my hormone journey from age 14 until present day, so 13 years. And we have a ton to get through today, so let's jump into it. Before we get started, I'm just going to toss a big old disclaimer out here. I feel like I shouldn't have to do this. It's kind of common sense that I shouldn't have to, but I'm going to do it anyways. This is not medical advice. This is a video about my personal journey, the things that I've done, the tips and tricks that I've used. You can take what you want from this video, but this is not medical advice for you to follow. So I don't remember when I got my first period. To be totally honest, I want to say it was between 14 and 16 years old. I know I was late, so it could be closer to 16, but just for the sake of the video, we're going to go to 14. So going all the way back to 2010, and I want to say my first couple periods were not horrible. They got pretty bad though, closer to 16, 17 years old at the end of high school. When we hear people talk about bad periods or horrible periods in terms of super irregular, so some of my cycles would be 53 days long. Some of them would be 14 days long. I had periods that were 7 days. I had periods that were 3 days. Like, there was never any way for me to be like, oh, my period should be coming now. It was like, oh, it's here, but I just had it 2 weeks ago. So they were all over the place. All over the place. I had like every symptom that you hear of that people have during their periods, like breast tenderness, low back pain, perineal pressure, like it literally felt like my uterus was falling out of my vagina, headaches, nausea, I would throw up because I was in so much pain. I had abdominal cramping, I had like muscle weakness and dizziness, everything. Like every symptom that you hear people having, I had it. The problem is when we have these sort of symptoms and we have these sort of periods, very few people tell you that that's not normal. Like very few people are like, you need to go get that checked out. And when you do go get it checked out with a general practitioner, a medical doctor, they put you on birth control. There's very little education and support in the area of women having horrible periods. Looking back, it's hard to kind of distinguish what exactly was causing these problems, but that's what was going on. When I was 20 years old and I was just about ready to leave for college, I saw a naturopath for the first time and she prescribed me with a vitamin B complex. She didn't diagnose me with anything. She just kind of took my symptoms and gave me a pretty regular thing that she would give most patients that she sees. So she gave me a vitamin B complex, which I did notice helped with my symptoms, but I was leaving for school. I was in an extremely high stress program. Like the athletic therapy program is incredibly high stress. I had limited funds, so I couldn't implement a lot of the strategies that a lot of people use when changing their lifestyle to better their hormone health. And my stress being so high all the time didn't help either. So I was just kind of stuck in this place of like, I guess I'll wait until I'm done school and then we'll figure out what to do from there. Fast forward to 4 years later. So I was 24 years old. So this is almost 10 years after my first period. I'd just been like dealing with the crap of PMS and having horrible periods. 24 years old, I started to see a different naturopath. So one that had been recommended to me by many different people, one that specializes a little bit more in hormone health. And she essentially, if you've never been to a naturopath before, naturopaths will take everything in your life into consideration. So the food you're eating, the activity you're doing, how you sleep, your stress levels, your relationships, they take everything into consideration, and they essentially come up with a plan of how you can go about addressing, in this case, my hormones from the lifestyle I was living. And it kind of showed which areas of my life were relating to each other. And she really, really helped to guide me through this process. So she recommended I do a hormone test. She gave me an option of like 4 or 5 different ones. I ended up choosing the Dutch test, which was honestly one of the most expensive ones, but I also had a little bit of coverage through my parents. So I just decided to go with the more expensive one that was going to give me the most answers. So the Dutch test is essentially a urine test that is 4 or 5 urine samples throughout different times of the week and different times during your cycle. And she basically took all of the information from that Dutch test, put it into a document for me so I could see which levels were elevated, which ones were affecting each other, and kind of where the issue was being caused. So from there, I got the Dutch test done. She recommended seed cycling for me. Seed cycling is essentially eating different seeds at different times during your cycle to better support your hormones and your organs. Hello. Thanks for joining us. I will leave you guys to research seed cycling on your own. I'm not an expert at it. I just she gave me a sheet and I followed the sheet. And I noticed just from the seed cycling that I noticed some changes in symptoms. I guess I didn't mention this before. I had acne like moderately. And I noticed that just with seed cycling that started to clear up. And I know there's a lot of other things in seeds and nuts that definitely support skin health and things like that. So that definitely helped a little bit. Between the time that she recommended the seed cycling to me and I got the results from the Dutch test, I just kind of did that seed cycling and waited for those results. She then called me and we went through the results, like through every single little detail. This is what she found. I'm actually just going to read it right off of the notes on my laptop because I don't want to mess any of this information up. We found that I had very high estrogen. I was estrogen dominant. This is very common in a lot of people. High estrogen levels typically cause those typical PMS symptoms. So the cramping, the perineal discomfort, the back pain, the breast tenderness, all that kind of stuff. She found that I had low progesterone, and when I say low, like the value was almost not even there. Like it was like 1% on a scale of 0 to 100. Low progesterone is related to infertility and difficulty making it to a full-term pregnancy. That scared me. I was getting married that year, and having children was something that we wanted at that moment. So when she told me that that is what low progesterone is related to, that scared the crap out of me. And I was immediately prepared to do as much as I possibly could to fix that issue. She also found that my stress hormone, or cortisol, so cortisol is the stress hormone, was very, very high, and it was more than likely what was causing the low progesterone. Cortisol and estrogen kind of work together as buddies. If one's elevated, it typically elevates the other one as well. So I knew I had a lot of work to do in my lifestyle to kind of address the high cortisol levels to hopefully help my estrogen to decrease so that we could get my progesterone to kind of shoot up. At this moment in time, so I was 24 years old, I was engaged, we were getting married in the fall. I think I started seeing the naturopath in like April. So that gave me a good like 5-6 months to sort of try to figure things out before we got married. The very first thing I did after getting my diagnosis was I started to learn about my condition and learning about the hormone process or the female cycle in general. Because let's be real, when do we ever learn about our entire hormonal cycle like in detail? Like maybe once or twice. I started to learn about my condition. I started to learn about what happens with my hormones at different phases during my cycle. If you've ever seen that, it's a graph that basically just shows the fluctuations of the hormones. I'll post a picture here if you haven't seen it. I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, here it is. I started to learn about just all of this stuff. And the more I learned about it, the more so much of it made sense to me. My naturopath had also prescribed me with some supplements at the time. I'm not going to share with you what they were, only because I don't trust the internet, and I know that some of you are just going to go pick up these supplements and take them, and they might not be right for you. So if you are experiencing these symptoms, just go see a naturopath, have them prescribe you with the supplements. Don't just take whatever someone else is taking. I started keeping a food and symptom diary. So I started tracking what I was eating and what my symptoms were like at different times during my cycle. And this is when I started to see some relationships between some of the things that I was eating and some of the things that I was experiencing in my cycle. So I'm just going to read a few things off of here because I made some notes and I just want to make sure that I am saying everything that I want to say. In learning about my condition, this involved consulting healthcare practitioners. So in my instance, this was a naturopath. I started researching what was happening inside my body and what the repercussions were. So, for example, I started researching low progesterone and what that is related to in terms of infertility. My naturopath actually told me that she didn't think I had ever ovulated before, or I hadn't been ovulating for a long time. I started researching what that meant. Like, if I was not ovulating, or if the chances of me ovulating were extremely low, what does that mean? And essentially it meant infertility or difficulty being able to get pregnant. And like I said, that is something that just absolutely scared the crap out of me. And I knew that this was something I needed to start to address. I started reading lots of books. I have one in particular that I'm going to share with you guys in a little bit. Started reading books. I was very open with my husband about my condition and the details of it, so he could be a second eye in kind of seeing what my symptoms were and how they were changing. If you have a significant other in your life, teach them about your hormone cycle. Teach them about it, because the drastic change that I had with my husband when I started teaching him about my condition and my diagnosis, he was, first of all, super understanding. He was extremely supportive. He made sure that when it came to the foods we were eating and the way I was feeling, he was supportive and he was able to help me in the best way possible. And let's be real, especially men know not one single thing about our hormone cycles. All they know is that we have a period. Like, half of them don't even know why we have a period or what it's for. So I know he didn't love learning about it, but I shared in great detail what was happening in my body, what should be happening in my body. And especially because we want to have kids in the future, that scared him a little bit too. So he was a little bit more in tune with it after I shared some of those details with him. So then after step 1, which was learning about my condition, step 2 was starting to adjust my lifestyle. So I started leaning into what I was feeling. If I was feeling really tired, I would nap. If I was feeling like really hyped and really excited, I would do exciting and adventurous things. If I was feeling spontaneous, I would do spontaneous things. I started just really leaning into what I was feeling and kind of following that with what I was doing and what I was eating and the type of activity I was doing. I started to reduce foods that I knew were causing my symptoms or causing inflammation or just making me kind of feel like junk. For me, those were processed foods, red meats. I noticed if I was eating burgers or if I was eating ground beef, I just didn't feel great after, and they definitely increased my cramping and my symptoms. Caffeine increases your cortisol. It increases that stress hormone and it keeps it elevated, especially if you have your coffee right first thing in the morning after you wake up. I was drinking 3 to 4 cups of coffee every day at any moment in the day. So I knew, and I was told by my naturopath this as well, I knew I had to start decreasing that caffeine intake or my cortisol was not going to change, which was a really hard thing to adjust. I was so severely addicted to caffeine, and like I was so addicted to caffeine to the point where if I was drinking it at 10 o'clock at night, I could just go to sleep. It had zero effect on me. So caffeine was a big thing that I really had to work on trying to decrease. Another one was dairy. Dairy was a big trigger, and I noticed that I also had a lot of like phlegm in my throat all the time. So I started to decrease the amount of dairy I was intaking. Right away, that phlegm went away, and I noticed I just felt like I had less inflammation manifesting in my body. And I started increasing foods that supported my hormone health. So I started adding in seeds and nuts, spinach and bitter greens, fish, broccoli, flax and hemp seeds, eggs, things that are rich in protein, that have healthy fats in them, that were not too bulky and too oily and too gross, but definitely helped to support my hormones. I started to adjust the exercise I was doing with the stage or phase of my cycle that I was in. So let's just say I was on my period and I was going to the gym and my body kind of felt like crap and I felt tired and I felt ugh. I would not push myself to do a full lift. I would not push myself to make sure that I was meeting my 1RMs. Like, this was the time that I was like, okay, I feel like crap. I feel exhausted. I'm just going to go for a walk instead. Or I'm going to do some yoga. I'm going to do some light stretching, just some mobility stuff. And then once I got into follicular, right after my menstrual phase, I really started to amp up that intensity again. So I definitely started to follow that. And that's also in the book that I'm going to talk to you guys about. She definitely goes through all kinds of different activity and when to do them at different times during your cycle, but I found that to be extremely helpful. The last few things that I did in adjusting my lifestyle were reducing the expectation of productivity, increasing strategic uses of self-care, and creativity and production. So I didn't force myself to do extra work or push myself so hard when I wasn't feeling productive. So at this time I was working for someone who demanded a lot, and they neglected their own mental health so much to the point that they kind of expected everyone else to do the same. And they wanted everyone to just be robots and just produce and just pump out work, for lack of a better word. I don't want to talk negatively about this person, but that's just kind of the environment that I was in and that I was working in at the moment. So step number 3. I'm not saying that if you are experiencing hormone fluctuations or hormone imbalances that you have to quit your job. In my situation, I was working for someone who created an extremely high stress environment, and it was not a friendly environment to work in. I went to work dreading it every single day. I came home upset. I was never happy. I was stressed to the max. My cortisol was sitting up here. I was eating like crap because this person didn't make me feel good. They made me feel like crap. No matter what I did, I couldn't do the right thing. So I quit my job. Immediately, I noticed I was sleeping better. I was eating better. I wanted to change my lifestyle more than just being in a really, really crappy environment. Like I said, I'm not saying you need to quit your job, but this was a good realization for me to kind of figure out where I needed to go next and what I needed to change in my life. Step number 4. This is not really steps in addressing my hormone imbalance, but it was something that happened along the way. So I was getting married. We didn't want to have children right away, if I even could, with my hormone fluctuations. And so I needed to try to figure out some mode of contraceptives. And without going into too much detail, I got an IUD with the recommendation of my naturopath, my gynecologist, and my medical doctor. All three of them talked with each other. They figured out the best contraceptive for me to use that would just be easiest for me and that would help the most, I guess. Let's just go with that information. So I got an IUD. I got a Kyleena. I won't go into detail about this. I can do a video all about my IUD experience at a later date. If you guys want, just comment below. Let me know if you want me to talk about my IUD experience. So with the Kyleena IUD, your period disappears because essentially it prevents that lining inside the uterus from forming. So I didn't have a period. So now learning how to track my cycle had to be done through my symptoms and how I was feeling throughout the month. So I'm really glad that I had taken the time to kind of adjust my lifestyle and lean into what I was feeling, because this allowed me to actually listen to my body and react to how my body was feeling, since I wasn't getting a period and I didn't have that tangible and visible moment of like, oh, I'm at day 1. It was just kind of like, which phase am I in at this moment? And then the next thing that happened was I started a business. And I don't know that starting a business was the best thing to do at this moment, but I didn't have a job from the time that I had quit my previous job. The place I had worked at previously was a place that I thought was endgame. Like, I thought I was going to stay there for 30 years. I thought I was going to just treat there forever, and I was going to have a great environment with all these awesome practitioners, and it just didn't end up that way. So I decided I was going to start a business. So I spent lots of time starting a business, but I used the strategic productivity and stress relieving strategies that I had used previous to that, and just kind of carried them through while I started that business. That's kind of like the process of having my period, getting diagnosed, and moving into just like changing my lifestyle. The book that I use, that I've been talking about a few times now, please ignore the this. Cooper happened to get a hold of it when he was a puppy. Regardless, I can still read it. This book is called In the Flow. It's by Alyssa Vitti, and if you are someone who does not understand the menstrual cycle, the phases of your cycle, what happens in each phase, read this book. She really, really, really lays everything out in a very easy way to understand. And she lays out what you should be eating at different times during your cycle, what type of exercise you should be doing, the type of productivity you should be doing. She really lays it out in a very, very easy way to understand. She wrote this book perfectly. So I highly recommend this book. In the Flow, Alyssa Vitti. I just got this one on Amazon. I'm sure you can get it at pretty much any bookstore. Like, I'm sure you can get it at Indigo or Barnes & Noble or wherever. So I use this book a lot. There are charts throughout this book that kind of lay out exercise for you and show you kind of it. Like, she literally makes it so easy. For example, foods. So she has a chart like this. She lays out follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual phase, and just the different types of meats you should be eating, or different types of foods you should be eating in each phase. And you can really follow this to a T if you want, especially in the beginning, and just see how your body feels during these phases while following the recommendations that she makes. Kind of my hormone journey. And now I'm kind of at a point of, I've had my IUD for almost 3 years. Actually, like almost exactly 3 years to the date, to be totally honest. So I have been a business owner for 2.5 years. I've had an IUD for 3 years. I now follow everything I do with the phases of my cycle and how I feel. When I go to the gym, I take into consideration which phase of my cycle I'm in. The foods I'm eating are very much related to my cycle. I don't push myself with exercise if I'm not ready to push myself. And I track my symptoms based off of what my body's feeling, because like I said, I don't have a period. That's just the reality of having an IUD, which I understand is a choice that I made. Which, do I know if my hormone imbalances are completely solved? No, I don't, because I have a hormonal IUD. I won't know that until I get it out. However, it's so easy for me to follow the way my body feels and the symptoms that I have at this moment in time. I can't help but be super confident in the fact that even if I get my IUD out, that won't change. So the only thing that's going to change is that I'm going to get my period back. But like I said, only time will tell. I have no idea at this moment in time. But I feel amazing. I have never felt so good in my life. I have never felt so confident in myself and in my capabilities and in my ability to care for myself. And even just in times when I feel like I'm not following my cycle as closely as I should, or in times when I all of a sudden get symptoms that I didn't know that just like randomly showed up, I can very easily adjust what I'm eating and what I'm doing, and those symptoms will disappear. I want to give you 5 tips for dealing with hormonal imbalances if you are someone who is currently dealing with this. Number 1, talk to a professional or a practitioner who makes you feel validated and heard. If you are going to a medical practitioner who basically just shoves birth control in your face and isn't willing to actually talk to you about the symptoms you're experiencing and what's going on, find a new one. That is medical advice. Find a new practitioner that is actually going to listen to you and validate your feelings and your symptoms. Number 2, keep a food and symptom diary. This is going to help you more than you think it's going to, especially if you do this before you start to talk to a professional or a practitioner, because you can look back at everything that you have written down, see where the correlations are, and that will help them in determining what is going on in your body. Number 3, don't push your body if you're not ready. Pushing your body to do things that you're not ready for, specifically in exercise, increases your cortisol, which also increases your estrogen. So if you are doing something in the gym that you're not ready for, or that is way too difficult for you, or you just feel like exhausted, but you still push yourself, you're probably amping up that cortisol. So dial it back a little bit, do things that you feel comfortable with. When you leave the gym, you should feel good. You should feel like accomplished and a little bit tired, obviously, but you shouldn't feel like, oh, that was the crappiest workout I've ever had. I feel disgusting. I feel so unaccomplished. Do things that you are actually ready for and don't push yourself so hard. That puts us into the next one. Number 4, eat and do things that make you feel good. Stop eating crap that makes you feel like crap. Eat things that make your body feel good. Eat fueling foods. Add in little bits of like flax and hemp seeds or things like that into your diet that kind of bulk up your diet and make you feel good. And number 5, easily the most difficult, but most easily said, stress relieving strategies. So find ways and strategies that you can relieve your stress. Figure out what those stressors are in your life and start to build strategies to decreasing that stress. And the very last thing I want to say is this process takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to figure out what's going on. It takes a lot of dedication to really stick to changing your lifestyle and changing the habits that you have. So give yourself a little bit of grace and just ride the waves of figuring out what's happening with your hormones, because obviously if you're either watching this video or you have started to address your hormones, you obviously have something that you want to work on or something that you are working on. So recognize that the process takes time and it's not going to be a quick fix, and it's going to be something that you have to stick with for a long time, even after you've addressed the hormone problems. So have some grace, have some patience. Give yourself some time and just enjoy the process, because it is a long, exhausting process, but it is so rewarding. I hope that this video has been helpful in explaining to you how to go about addressing your hormone imbalances, sort of which steps to take, because I do understand that it is a very confusing process and it's hard to know where to even begin, especially if you go to a practitioner who kind of just dismisses your symptoms. If you have any questions about any of the things I talked about in this video, please feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll be sure to get back to you. And don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so that you're notified when I post more videos.